Thanks for joining us for another episode of Biotech and Life Sciences CEO Stories. Today, we're excited to be joined by Leonard Mazur, CEO and co-founder of Citius Pharmaceuticals, a company with a pipeline in adjunct cancer care and oncology with a recently approved targeted immune therapy in relapsed or refractory cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. Leonard's a serial entrepreneur, founding earlier companies in dermatology and cardiology after beginning his career in sales and marketing at Medicis and ICN Pharmaceuticals, BASF, and predominantly Cooper Labs. He was born in Ansbach, Germany, to Ukrainian parents who immigrated to the US when Leonard was very young. He's the recipient of the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. He also served in the Marine Corps while he was earning his undergraduate and MBA degrees at Temple. Thanks for joining us, Leonard.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I think it'll be fun.
Most definitely.
Leonard, you told me a little story when we first met about your parents and how they met and how they got to Germany from Ukraine.
Yeah.
And all that. Can you maybe share that story with us?
Certainly. So what happened was this. So I'll start with my father. My father was actually in the anti-communist and anti-Polish underground, and had a little group, from what I've been told, in Western Ukraine. Actually, in those days, it was Eastern Poland.
Okay.
And between the two world wars, that was all Eastern Poland, what is today Western Ukraine. So what happened was when Hitler invaded Poland, my father got drafted into the Polish army and was captured and managed to escape because he had enough presence of mind on it. I wonder, I marvel at this. He rolled civilian clothing underneath his uniform. So if they're walking to the camp, wherever they were going, he just ducked into an alleyway and escaped, and put on civilian clothes, and that was it. So when he got back to his area, the Russians, or the Soviets, as they were called, took over, because Hitler, actually what he did is there was a treaty called the Non-Aggression Pact of 1939, or the von Ribbentrop Pact, something like that. And it was the Germans gave the Soviets all of Eastern Poland and the Baltic countries. So they immediately started coming in, and they sentenced my father to death while he was hiding out. So, and then somehow he found out that the Germans wanted all people of German descent who were living in those areas to be repatriated to Germany. So my father went to a priest friend, and he got a birth certificate that said he was of German descent. He went to a checkpoint, and they sent him to Bavaria, which was a big break because that became an American zone after the war. So he's in Bavaria, in this little town, Ansbach, which is outside of Nuremberg somewhere. And one day he saw the Germans parading the women into work. He saw my mother. He didn't know her. He liked the way she looked. So he went to the commandant of the camp, and he said, "I need somebody to do work for me." The commandant said, "Take whoever you want. We have plenty of people here." He picked out my mother, and he ultimately got her out of that camp. And that's how they met. But, they all had it. My mother, as I found out, my mother actually saved the lives of two Jewish girls that were in that camp. Because what happened was they were not supposed to be in that camp. And they were supposed to be in a death camp. That was a forced labor camp. So the girls came to my mother and asked if she would teach them how to make the sign of the cross and all the prayers and everything. And she did. And the Germans still weren't convinced. So they said somebody had to sign a document under potential death sentence or whatever if it was discovered otherwise that these girls were Christians. And my mother, at whatever age, 20 probably, something like that, signed that document and they survived and made it to the end of the war. Which, you know, what's interesting about all that? I never heard that from my parents. None of it. They never spoke one word about it to me. I heard it from my relatives when I started visiting Ukraine and I connected up with them and they knew all about it. They knew everything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I interviewed with my grandson, a fellow who served in World War II, and it was great. Brought tears to my eyes, really. Uh, but the thing was that he said, you know, we never talk about it. We don't talk about the war.
No,
So
no,
it's,
they
it's
didn't.
such a terrible thing
Yeah.
that you'd rather forget.
Right.
So, you and I kind of share an interest, a passion for life sciences, but neither one of us has a scientific background. Yours is, you're a business guy.
Right.
Um, and so from that standpoint, do you think how's that influenced the way you think about what makes a good investment?
That's a great question. You know, I learned a lot in the first company where I was, which was Cooper Labs. And Cooper Labs was a real entrepreneurial company. They made 150 acquisitions at one point, and it was run by a gentleman by the name of Parker G. Montgomery, who was a Boston blue blood, Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law,
Okay.
assistant to the Secretary of State at one point. So, but he was not a science guy at all. And what happened, I witnessed this firsthand. The company started uh, making inroads into ophthalmology. What the company did ultimately is they formed companies around medical specialties. So one of the very first ones they did that way was in ophthalmology. They became known as Cooper Vision, became a real giant in that field at one point. But early on, they picked up along the way a company that had technology in extended wear contact lenses. And what happened was the lens was called permalens, and so uh, the Parker and the company brought in consultants. The consultants said that they advised that this would never get through the FDA. Impossible. The FDA would never allow anybody to keep a lens on overnight or anything like that for long periods of time. It was impossible. And yet, Parker had a right-hand man who was his science advisor. He was a PhD, brilliant, sort of a maverick in some ways, but a great person, great human being. And he advised Parker to make the plunge, make the investment, and let's get this thing through the FDA. And it worked. And here was a man with absolutely no science background whatsoever, and yet uh, he he took the risk and said, "All right, we'll do it." Whereas I'm convinced that if it had been somebody with a science leaning, real science leaning, and all those experts started coming forward, they probably would have said no. So yeah, so basically, I learned a lot from that because, as I started to say, if that had been a science-oriented CEO, he probably would have said, "Let's not do it." He would have listened to his science people.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're looking at an investment, what is it that makes you trust your gut
Hard to say.
and
I'll give you an
maybe
example.
some
I mean,
objections from
we picked. We have a cancer drug that got approved.
right. And we're going to
And
talk about that.
so listen, I mean, what happened there was I get contacted by Tim. I don't know if you know Tim Opler, who ran a company called Torreya Partners. It's a banking boutique
Yeah. Hmm.
now at Stifel, and he contacts me and said, "Hey, I'm representing Dr. Reddy's, and they've got this cancer drug, and it's going to be an auction, so you got to be prepared to bid." And I said, "Okay." So I said, "Guide me along as we go along." All right. So basically, what it was, totally by accident, a year before, we hired a chief medical officer. And that chief medical officer was an oncologist who spent 23 years at Roswell Park in Buffalo and published 180 papers in lymphoma.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
So
That was lucky.
he was in our tiny little company. At that time, we had like 8 people. Okay. So, so I go to him. I said, "You know this drug?" He said, "Are you kidding? I was an advisor to them on this drug, and I used it when I was still in practice because then he went to Celgene for 5 years after that." He said, "I think it's a good drug. It's a solid drug. It works. So it doesn't cure, but it will help control." So I then that was one side of it, but then there was the financial side. And so fortuitously, these things sometimes line up your way. What had happened was 6 months before that auction, we managed to raise over $100 million in 1 month in an incredible raise at the height of the pandemic.
Oh, well, okay.
In February of 21, it was like it happened.
Yeah.
So
Money was free.
I had cash, and I was looking for something that would be late stage. I wanted something late stage. This was about as late stage as you could get. So, but short of an approval. And I had to take a big chance because the bidding went up and it got up to 40 million. And we had to cross the line, and I had people saying to me, "Don't do it, man. It's too much, too high, too high." I said, "No, it's not." I said, "Not for something." They were one patient away from concluding the trial. So I said, "Fine." It took them like 10 years almost. So we went for it and we got it. And we won the auction. And the drug did ultimately get approved. So and we're getting ready to launch in the second quarter. So we're making preparations now. So it's it yeah, you got to be prepared. I'm a risk taker. I'm not a risk averter. My personality is, my saying. You probably maybe I said it to you. That is, unless if you're not standing on the edge, you're taking up too much space.
Right.
Okay. All right.
You probably inherited that from your dad.
Yeah, probably. You're right. You got a good point there. So you know, and I don't fit the profile, the typical. I always say I'm an American of Ukrainian descent, so but I don't fit that profile because most of the people that I knew that were in that uh, in that the ethnic environment all went for professional titles. You had to be a PhD or an MD or a lawyer or something. So, uh, it's really funny. So I busted my backside just to finish my MBA because I was a psych major. I had to take all the courses. I only got a waiver on once, and I had to do it at night. And I drove 1,000 miles a week to get it done. Okay. And I remember after all this big struggle, my mother-in-law comes up to me, and she was also Ukrainian, and she says to me, she goes, "Well," I said, "Well, what?" She goes, "When are you getting a doctorate degree?" I said, "Okay." That wasn't good enough. Okay.
So yeah. So let's backtrack for a minute here and
Yeah.
and just get back to um, Citius itself and your meeting with your partner, your co-founder, Myron
Yeah,
Holyback. How did you guys come together?
that's even an interesting story unto itself. What happened was Myron Holubiak and I started out at the same time in the industry, and we were both in pharmaceutical sales. He was in Pittsburgh, I was in Philadelphia. He's at Roche, I'm at Cooper Labs, and roughly about the same time, we both get promoted into market research, or he was in something like that. I was a market research analyst at Cooper, and Cooper sends me to a IMS training seminar. And there are like 20 people there, 25 people. I'm looking down at the list of names and I see Myron Holubiak. I said, there's only one there's only one group this guy's part of. he's out of our ethnic group. He's got to be a Ukrainian. So I went up to him and it was really funny. You know, he was living like about 5 miles down the road from where I was in New
Wow.
Jersey, and it turned out just by this is really funny. What's really coincidental about it? I called my mother-in-law up and I said, do you know the Holubiak family?" She started to laugh, and I said, she goes, "Yes." She said, his mother is one of my best friends.
Oh,
I had no idea. And that's how we got to know each other. All right. So,
wow.
and it's kind of it's interesting. So we stayed in touch over the years. I always thought we'd get together at some point, do something, and then finally, I had my I decided I wanted to go start up another company, and I thought he would be the one. And we went, both of us went down to MD Anderson, and we licensed the drug uh, for for sterilizing infected central venous catheters. So we're still working on that.
Yeah, so let's talk. That's Minilock, right?
Yep.
Let's talk about that, how you came to, purchase.
Let me tell you that has a story of itself. All right, and it actually began with when I was myself and Joe Kravolka were partners in a company called Triax Pharmaceuticals. It was a derm company, and I had been chasing. He and I had been competing against each other first. I've been trying to buy a drug called Minicin, which was an antibiotic for acne, from Wyatt. Originally, I started with Letterly even when they had it before they got acquired. So basically, we wind up acquiring Minicin. And about a year after we acquired it, I get a call one day from the Department of Defense. And they said to me, they said, the reason we're calling you is because your company owns the file on Minicin IV, which Wyeth or Lederle had discontinued because they had launched another hospital antibiotic. So he said, we're treating soldiers that were wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan in a hospital in Germany for a certain bacteria. And this is the only one that works. It's the IV form of it. He said, but we can't continue the treatments here because it's not available here. Would your company be willing to bring it back? I said, no, we're a dermatology company. We're not even a hospital company or an IV company or anything like that. And I said, bringing it back could be almost as bad as getting an NDA approved. So I finally sat down with the guy begged me. So I sat down with Joe and I said, look, it's going to be a loser financially, but we got to do the patriotic thing here. So basically, I said, it'll cost us something, but let's see if we can do it. We had a good regulatory guy with us in the company, and he got it done. He did it in a year's time, which was really surprising. So what happened was all we could afford were two people on the road covering hospitals. It's so ridiculous, so all of a sudden, I noticed we started getting sales out of MD Anderson. So I go down there, make an appointment with the chief of infectious disease. His name is Isan Rudd. And I found out they weren't buying it to treat anybody. He was buying it to do experiments. He was trying to find the ideal solution for something for infected catheters. So basically, well, I wished him well. He was so early on. I said, "Oh, it's too early for us. We're not gonna do anything with this now." But what happened was ultimately we sell the company, and a lot of time passed. That Martin and I get together. We go down back down to MD Anderson. I go down there, meet with Dr. Rad, and he had progressed all the work. So that's when we decided we funded the early work ourselves personally. So that's how we got started with him. And that project would never have occurred if it hadn't been for the fact that that IV form came back, and that's how it came back. So so again, you never know. You never really know what the outcome or how you're going to impact somebody. And our business is one of the few where the impact is positive all the time. It's going to either save a life or it's going to change a person's life, but it's positive. So
that's the wonderful thing about it. So then there are a couple of other, before we get back into Lymphir, which I want to spend some real time on, but I want to get into Lymphir. But before we do, let's talk about a couple of other assets
right.
that Citius has. One is a allogenic stem cell for a respiratory syndrome, and then the other is a hemorrhoid treatment, which I understand there are none available other than preparation H.
Yep. So the stem cell product, that drug we in-licensed, and we tried and we couldn't make a go of it. It would take way too much. It was beyond our means completely. So we gave it a shot. We went to the FDA with it on a pre-IND basis, and they laid out everything for us. And once we took a good look at it, we go, "Whoa, we bit off more than we could chew here." So we kind of backed away from it. And then the hemorrhoid drug, that's one where the FDA, believe it or not, 21st century, there isn't a single prescription drug approved for the treatment of hemorrhoids. It's unheard of. So we think we have a good product there. It's a combination of halobetazole, topical steroid, high potency with lidocaine. We got a PRO questionnaire that we've designed with it that we patented, and we're going to sit down with the agency and see if we can't get approval on a certain protocol for a phase 3 trial. And then we'll seek a partner ultimately, depending on the requirements that we come up with.
Okay, because that's a big sales force.
Yeah, that's not for us. That's for somebody that's going to be familiar with DTC advertising, primary care sales force. We're much more specialty oriented, but I thought it's something that we could monetize for the shareholders of the company.
Okay. So let's get more into Lymphir now. So when you acquired it, they were down to their last patient in a trial.
Yep. Right.
It comes to you, and then you submit it, and you get a CRL.
Yeah, I know.
Had to be a good day.
That was very disappointing. I will never ever plan for a party before an approval again. All right. I was going to have everybody here. All right. Oh my heavens! I had to wave that off. So, but basically, what it was, there was a certain test that it's called an endotoxin release test that was basically that passed. We passed the test. However, the validation of it wasn't complete, and so the validation process was going to run like 4 to 6 months past the PDUFA date. We thought the agency was going to give us a break and say, "All right, you could go, but don't go to the market till that test is complete." No, they chose to give us a CRL, and It's interesting with shareholders that aren't familiar with the terminology in our industry. I actually got it's because a complete response letter is a very diabolical term. I got emails from shareholders who congratulated me on
Right.
getting an approval. So what are you going to do? So, but that happened, and so we went through it. It wasn't difficult to submit the validation results once we finished with it, and we got approved in August of 24.
Did you ever find out what you could have done differently so that you didn't get that?
They wanted that validation procedure. Yeah, it
So you
took.
could have waited 6 months and done the
Yeah,
validation and then
yeah,
submitted.
right, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so tell us about kind of the target and the mechanism of action, what you're doing with it, about the drug
So
itself.
it has a very interesting MOA, basically, in that it reduces something known as Tregs in the microenvironment of a cancer cell. And where that has relevance, it's kind of interesting. An investigator, he's an OBGYN oncologist at the University of Pittsburgh, filed for an investigator IND to combine our drug with Keytruda and to look at it in solid tumors in female cancers. And and the reason he did is because we had published some animal data that showed that if you combined our drug with with something like a Keytruda, like or a PD-1 inhibitor, basically uh, it would perform better than each of those by themselves.
Mm.
So this investigator decided to look at it on that basis. And the reason he did is because Keytruda actually increases the Tregs. And so if those, it can affect the overall efficacy. So he submitted data for a poster that got accepted it's just this past November. It looks like we've got it's not the trial's not over yet. It's just about over, but we'll have some final data on it soon. We think there's a good possibility there that it should go ahead for probably a phase 2 trial at some point. But there's also another investigator idea at the University of Minnesota with Linfear now and combining it with something known as CAR T, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's another cancer treatment. So basically, we'll see what that does, what effect that has. But it's kind of interesting that all of a sudden, a drug that is approved for a very rare cancer, small numbers, is all of a sudden in the forefront of significant cancer treatment. So basically, I like that association, but it's not. It's more than the association. It's just the fact that this could really be beneficial to people.
Right. So, are there only 3,000 patients, I think.
Correct. That's true.
Um,
So
do you have competition?
we do. We have at least we have a couple drugs. One of them is called Etcetras, and it's a C-gen drug that Pfizer now has. This market is about a $400 million market, and the other principal competitor is Protolego by Kyoto Kirin, and there's a third one that's not promoted that Bristol Myers had that they took over from Celgene.
I know that at some point, she told me the first time, at some point in your career, you mortgage the house,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And you've got, I think, $22 million of your own money in this
Correct.
now, give
Yep.
or take.
Yep.
And you're thinking about the shareholder.
Yeah. Well,
I
I'm
think
a
I love
shareholder, so my interests and the shareholder interests are totally aligned, completely.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's so wonderful to hear because I am so frustrated with companies coming out with great data. And then the next day, there's a secondary. The next day, there's an S3.
Right. Yeah.
Insiders. How will you ever expect to raise real money if that's your activity?
Yeah.
Once you have some success.
Yeah. Well, you gotta do what I see. I see, the difference between myself and all the other CEOs in this business, they're all working for stock options. I'm not. Okay? I'm not working for stock options. I'm working for the shareholders. I'm working for everybody getting a great return. That's what I want. That's my goal.
$23 million market cap on a $400 million.
Oh, we'll see.
With only two competitors.
These things happen. That's all.
So do you have a code now? Have you applied for a code and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, J code. We got a J code. They gave it to us. So
okay.
Effective in April. Yep.
So you're ready to go.
We are ready. We've been working with Eversana. You know them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're good. So we've identified where all the treaters are. We know exactly. We've already laid out all the sales territories. We hired a national sales manager from one of the competing companies who launched the last drug launched in this market, and we've got the beginnings of a good staff here for that purpose.
How many salespeople will you have eventually? Do you think?
What will
How many salespeople will you hire eventually?
25.
25. And
25.
how many people do you have in the company now?
We have somewhere around 23.
So you're going to double the size of the company.
Yeah, just about correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have any kind of sales?
Well, hold on. Let me just say one thing. So those people that come on board, that group of 25, that's going to be a mix of sales reps, medical liaison reps, and KOL reps, as they're called.
Okay.
They're going to be on the payroll of Eversana. All right. However, they'll carry in Citius Oncology business cards, and then over time, as our volume increases, we'll transition everybody full time onto our payroll.
Okay.
And it's the same thing with the management of CTOR or Citius Oncology. Right now, the whole management team is the Citius team on a shared services basis. That too will change as the volume increases. Then we'll make everybody full time.
Okay. So, what is do you have a pro forma that you can talk about?
No, I can't. We have not disclosed anything like that at this moment. So,
okay,
not yet.
But you may not be able to talk about this as well. But I know that you've engaged Jefferies.
Correct. That's a whole different side. All right. So everybody knows that we've retained Jefferies for strategic alliances and to explore strategic alternatives for us, which would include finding partners for us in Europe, as well as potential buyer for the business here in the U.S. So that we're going to do again. What's going to govern that whole process is getting the best return for the shareholders.
I love to hear that. So, most of your career, you've been doing acquisitions in revenue producing businesses.
All the time.
Now you're managing a cash burning business.
I know.
How do you approach that differently, or is it the same mindset?
No, it's sometimes I'm really bothered by it, to tell you the truth, but because I was such a revenue person, but you couldn't believe it. But I made the transition somehow. But my desire is to get us revenue producing as quickly as possible. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. And you paused the stem cell work.
Yep, we did.
How do you determine when to pause? And then how do you manage the kind of the individual egos involved in the company, whose pet project it is?
Well, since we were so small when all that happened, it wasn't difficult managing those.
Okay.
There were no individual egos.
Okay.
That was easy.
Okay. Okay. How do you reconcile being a risk taker in a business with such a high failure rate?
I've always been a risk taker, so all my life.
And you're still happily married.
Yeah.
I always bring out the story. Maybe you've heard this. Stefan Bancel, the CEO at Moderna, said to his wife when he proposed, "We're either going to be really rich or really, really poor." And she went for
it. Believe me, I know.
So you must be a very lovable guy, Leonard.
I try to be. I have a good supportive wife at home. That helps. Believe me. You have no idea. That helps a lot. Okay. So.
But you've also been very generous with your success. I read that you had been a major benefactor at the College of Letters at Temple and at your high school. Why is giving back so important to you?
Well, I think it's like this. I think if you don't get your success by yourself, you didn't achieve it. I don't care who you are. You did not achieve it by yourself. There were people along the way that helped, and I think I learned my lesson about that a long, long time ago. So as a result, my philosophy has always been that if you can give back, give back, give back where it deserved to be given back. So I'm very careful about that. So, but I've done that, and but I think my wife and I are. One of the first things we did at one point was we gave a substantial donation to my high school.
Right.
So which was going to be shut down by the Archdiocese of Philadelphia.
Oh.
All right, and the reason why, because the high school I went to, it was run by the Christian Brothers. It was called West Catholic High School for Boys. Okay, in those days, and West Catholic High School for Girls was located 3 blocks away. So, and the neighborhood that it drew from was heavily Irish, some Italians, and I was one of the lone Ukrainians probably. So, so what happened was the neighborhood changed. It became 100% all minority, and the enrollment dropped. And it was, I thought that school was doing such a great job with those kids that became the worst neighborhood in Philadelphia, that they were saving lives. They were saving lives. So I met with the Archbishop at that time, and I said, I'm going to give a donation, but you have to give me your word that you're not closing this school. And he did. So, and you know what it is about that school? It's really interesting. For 3 years in a row now, maybe 4 years in a row even, 100% of the seniors have college acceptances.
Oh, wow.
All right. You won't hear that anywhere. Okay.
No, you won't.
Oh, it's so remarkable. And when you go there and you meet those students, they love that school. And the reason they do is because the faculty, the administration, everybody there cares about them. And they know it.
Yeah. Well, I went to a Catholic high school in Cleveland in a Ukrainian neighborhood. It was all Ukrainian and Slovenians.
That's so ironic.
And
Okay.
the girls' school was 3 blocks down the street.
Right.
And kind of the same sort of progression. So
Wow.
very interesting. Leonard, I've had a lot of fun with our talk today. I hope you have too. We had some laughs and all that sort of thing, and
Yep.
I wish you all the best of luck.
Yep.
I think
It's okay.
you
So
could be a
don't
little,
mind that phone ringing. I ignore it all the time. Yeah. You know what's interesting anymore? All my important calls come in on a cell phone. All the junk calls come in on my landline. I
Sure.
never pick up my landline. I never even use my landline anymore.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Don't even have one. So,
Yeah.
but it's been a pleasure, and I wish you all the luck in the world, and we'll be following your progress as
Okay.
you begin your marketing.
Thank you. And someday I look forward to getting together with you in person, hopefully.
Thanks for tuning in to the Life Sciences and Biotech Podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. The information contained in this website and podcast are purely informational and not considered investment recommendations. Tim Doherty's participation in Biotech Insights is separate and apart from his role as an investment advisor representative. Nothing contained herein can be construed as a recommendation or endorsement of any of the companies discussed. Tim Doherty also has no financial affiliation with any of the companies mentioned in this communication. Tim Doherty makes no representation that the information contained in this material is accurate and is under no obligation to update this information as changes occur.